Everyone, Masters of the Musiverse, getting another interview out there. Don't mind the mess behind me. This is just the way life is right now. And I've been wanting to post more regularly, but the school year just has swallowed me up, and I'm trying to keep my head above water and just doing these when I can. I even planned to be ahead of this by doing a bunch of interviews in the summer, trying to, like, oh, I'll do these in the summer and then I'll edit them, and it'll buy me time. And that just didn't quite do it. And that's why you're going to hear us talking about some summer things in this conversation. So I am very excited for this interview. Michelle McCauley is a member of the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe in Nevada. And she's got a great YouTube channel, talks about a lot of things regarding music education and Native American culture, as well as she's a dancer, and she has many demonstrations. Wonderful YouTube channel, check it out. I also have a guest co-host. You might remember Kevin Huseth from a past interview. Kevin is, boy, man, he is so on fire for this. He is super prepared for this interview. He knows so much, but he knows that he doesn't know everything, and so he asks great questions. I'm so thankful for that relationship. This notion of how do we bring Native American music into our music classrooms is I want to say it's a hot button issue, and it's something that we probably should have been talking about a long time ago. But if you go to Band Director's Facebook page right now, you'll see people talking about it. And it's something that we want to kind of fill ourselves with knowledge before we jump in, because there are ways to do this disrespectfully, and we can be better than that. We can be great examples. We can set great examples for our students by learning and learning from people like Michelle. You won't be unsatisfied with this conversation. Michelle is very thorough in her answers, very honest. I think you're going to look forward to this episode of Masters of the Musiverse.
Welcome to Masters of the Musiverse. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and YouTube channel, like this video, and click the bell to be notified of new videos with guests like Michelle McCauley here. I had the fortune to hear author and professor of Ojibwe, Anton Troyer, speak this spring. I was confronted with some really uncomfortable truths about Native American culture and how it's been left out of our education. I've found all kinds of gaps and holes in my education as I've pressed myself to learn and do some research. As part of my research, I ran into Kevin Huseth and learned that he has a real fire for this. He's really on fire. I want to say he's a few steps ahead of me, but I feel like he's a car drive ahead of me, not just a few steps. So, and then as part of my learning, I also found Michelle McCauley and her honest and informative YouTube channel. And I knew I had to speak with her. So essentially that brings us here today. So today I'm excited to speak with Michelle McCauley and my first ever guest co-host, Kevin Huseth. Thank you for joining, both of you. Thank you for joining us today. So, I'd like to model a respectful and open dialogue throughout this interview, as I think it would benefit other educators that want to have similar conversations. So what I've been most guilty of is not understanding the diversity of Native American cultures in the United States. The idea that there's not one answer for a lot of questions that are asked. Just as, like, for example, I cannot say, hey, all Minnesotans and Americans agree that, this blank thing is true. So I want to lead off, Michelle, with a question of what name do you prefer that we use for Native Americans?
Well, I've been working in this field since I have been 22. So that was 17 years ago. And I was fresh out of undergrad college working at the University of Nevada, Reno in diversity. This question was asked then. And at the time, being younger, being 22, I thought, yeah, I have an answer for you. But I don't have an answer for you. And it depends. So for me personally, it depends on who I'm talking to, what terminology I'm going to use. So I'm an international world traveler and I've done cultural exchanges with other groups. So if I'm internationally talking, my indigenous relatives, like in New Zealand, of Hawaii, of any land that I'm in, the original people, I will use indigenous. And then I can say I'm Native American. But we also have a border north of us, which is in going into Canada. And Canada is light years ahead of where the United States is in recognizing what they have done. So the term indigenous up there is used a lot. And I was very new to that term when I was about 17 years ago. So it depends on who I'm talking to. I could say Native American, but I've also talked to some people who were in the American Indian movement back in the 1960s fighting for our rights. And some of them will say that, no, I want to be called American Indian because it was the American Indian movement. So this is where you just need to have experience knowing who you're talking to. And some of them, even from my reservation, and this is probably some real insider information, but when I was growing up, I never referred to myself as Native American because I went to school with nothing but kids from my reservation. So what we said to each other was we were Indian or Indian, and you will still get young people, maybe even adults, calling themselves Indian or Indian, NDN. And you see people saying, well, we have a taco, and this is something that kind of all Native tribes know about. This is something that north of the border and United States, we can say, oh, have you had an Indian taco? But then some will say, no, it's a Navajo taco. No, but across the board, they'll say Indian taco or Indian taco. So you just have to have experience in exchanges to know what to say. And personally, I do lots of audiences. So when I'm talking to only Native people, literally, I say Native people, Native youth. And that's when I know I'm addressing only Native American people. And I do that a lot. And then when I go into talking to music educators, if they're primarily United States, then I will say Native American. But if I'm in a certain state and they're only from there, then I try to start breaking it down by tribal nations because they should know that. So ultimately, this is not a yes, that's correct or incorrect. And I thought in my 22-year-old wisdom that maybe I could crack the code and know what the term is. But cultural studies, ethnic studies, they go through rebranding every 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. Like, terminologies change. So there's no correct answer, I could say, one that just sits well, because you could say Native American, and depending upon if you have people there from a reservation or someone there, somebody, if they don't like that term and I said it was okay, they're not going to care. They're going to have problems with, well, we're American Indian, we're indigenous people, you need to, it could get into that, or it could go that way, or someone could raise their hand. I just want to clue you in that we should be called, there could be a million different reactions. And I've had all of those reactions.
So I did a little internet research on you, and I found out you graduated the University of Nevada in Reno, master's degree in music education. You're a contributing writer to Decolonizing the Music Classroom, and I'm curious about that. Can you give us a little snapshot on what Decolonizing the Music Room is all about?
I spoke up in a choral methods class when she was saying we should use My Country 'Tis of Thee to place students, in the alto, soprano, bass 1, bass 2, or just for voice. And I just said, I'm not comfortable using that song. I don't want to use that song. I was like, that song, realistically, because of where I come from, and I know where I come from, this isn't the land where my fathers died. And if you know the story of my tribe was able to fight off the people in our area. And then we never started any wars after that, whatever. We had to stand up for ourselves, and we did. So my tribal leaders, I don't want to say they stayed completely intact, but we stood up for and fought for. So that song doesn't apply to me or the many students who are coming in this country. So I said that to the professor, and the professor just said, I never thought of it like that. In 2018, I was an elementary music teacher for a while, but I ended up resigning because of the information that I know in the history and how to be culturally responsive and collect to every cultural group. I always assume I know nothing, and then I find out. But that doesn't work well with educators who are used to seeing it's not in the book. It just doesn't sit well. And I'm not a person who is going to, okay, well, let me do a patriotic concert just because, let me have my Native students here sing a patriotic concert just because you're uncomfortable with knowing about our culture and I'm here to teach you about it. I can't do that. I'm unable to do that, but that doesn't sit well with administrators who are following a completely different line of thinking. So I resigned, and I was like, what am I going to do? So when I resigned in 2018, I went to as many forums as I could to talk about Native stuff, because I believed, and like you guys, I believed there were educators out there who would listen and who were interested and wanted somebody who is culturally responsible. I knew there were people out there, they just weren't in my district. So I started going on forums, and I went on enough times, and that at the time Decolonizing Music started, I got an email asking if I wanted to be part of this team, because this lady was seeing me comment in a lot of the ORF and the Kodai, which is the time I was elementary. I wasn't part of middle school or high school, though that is where the majority of my experience is elementary, beginning band, middle and high. But so I got asked, and I said, yeah, I'll be a part of this. And she told me what it was for. And I was just feeling that need to I'm going to talk to whoever can listen. I know people are not going to listen. I know I've had enough of you can't know every culture. I've already had enough of I call them like maybe the stock answers. They're kind of like, you can't know every culture, blah, blah, blah. I don't know any natives. Native music is too sacred. I've heard enough excuses that I'm just going to say who listens. And so once that started in 2018 and I became a part of that, we launched together, and then I was able to share more. And then since that time, I'm not as active, because through that, different people contact me like yourself, and I end up doing other projects that take up a lot of my time. And so it's a really good thing that there are those people who want to listen. And that's really who I'm interested in talking to and sharing with, because there's no point in me trying to share information with somebody who's made up their mind, well, I'm going to use Go My Son as my Native American music. I'm going to continue to play these westernized, songs. I'm going to continue to play Anasazi with my band, even though the description of Anasazi has not, it's historically inaccurate, and everything about that song is just about stereotypical from Hollywood. So if those people are the majority right now, but I think that maybe they won't be very soon.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people that are interested in the conversation, and certainly people like Kevin too that I'm just recently getting to know, and what we want to do something too. We are hoping to create things for people as well, in addition to this conversation.
So my first question for you is pretty general. What are some pressing issues facing Native Americans right now, like nationwide or just in your own community, that we as teachers need to know about?
One of the last polls that we bring up, 80% of Americans think Native American people are dead, are gone. And that's a huge issue. And so if you think somebody's gone, and I think the entire history in every state has been while we get access to your songs. You know, it's almost as if it's a free-for-all, like not respecting and not asking, just taking. That's pretty much the huge thing that I see is when people say, oh, I want to be more inclusive of Native, they immediately, well, I called up this museum, I'm going to go take this. I'm going to go look at the National Library of Congress and I'm going to take this song. And sometimes I just ask, like, what are you guys, what are the local tribes around you? Or if they're in a big city. And oftentimes I get, there is no tribes here. And I'm in a big city, but to anyone listening, every big city in the United States has a population of Native Americans, and the majority of Native Americans live off the reservation. And the reason why that is because the government, when the boarding school system was coming to its end, they offered kids, they already took the kids from the parents, or they got sent there. They offered these 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds the ability to go to a city. They said, we'll give you so much amount of money, we'll just dump you there. So in the cities, there's no reservations, but there's usually a center. So the cities are the most heavy populated places, I guess you could say, of Native American people. And the other issue plaguing us today is the fact that we have over 576 federally recognized tribes, like the one you mentioned. What that means is if you cross that line onto a reservation, you go there, there are actual places. There are laws that are there. And one of the biggest laws that I think just recently, the Supreme Court is still making rulings on court cases dating back to the 1800s, before certain states even became a state. So that's another thing that educators need to be very, very aware of, is that at any time, like Oklahoma, the whole entire state of Oklahoma just got declared Native land. But what does that mean? Does that mean everybody there gets kicked out? No, that's a very modern issue. That's a very modern problem. Now, each state has their own resources, and a lot of times Natives were pushed on to what's supposed to be the most non-resourceful, or, you know, the not good land at all. But if something's found there, understand that we get under attack by the state, the federal government. And if you have kids who have parents who want to go protest or who want to go do this, depending upon how those tribal members do this, the kids can be affected. But then you also have the loss of culture from the boarding schools. All my grandparents went to the boarding schools. So what that means is they did not pass down their languages, Washoe, Shoshone, Paiute. Those are the three main here. They all spoke those languages when they were born. They did not hand those down to us. My grandparents did not hand it down to my parents, who did not hand it down to me. So you have to understand, any problems that we have on reservation, you hear drinking, drugs, that is not a us problem. That is a problem that the United States government started themselves by placing us in boarding schools and subjecting whoever it is in whatever state to all the many things there. So all the problems you see stemming on Natives were not created by us. But there are realities. So we're in a state of restoration, if you will, and knowing like what you're doing, getting to know the culture, but being in it. Like there's a lot of, in Minnesota, I know there's some casinos. I think there was just a huge powwow there, like massive powwow there, where the best of the best go. And there's constantly those powwows are a really good way, especially in Minnesota, if you can get to some of them, the bigger ones. That is a great way to show how innovative we are and what we've become. And that's an intertribal gathering. That's intertribal from Canada and the United States, but also to watch and see how music is done. But I don't know, are the students in your school, do they get an opportunity like during an assembly to do songs, or do they ever show their culture?
Yeah, so I've been pretty impressed with how Cloquet has been managing that. We have an Anishinaabe language program. We have there's an American Indian education program that's specifically for our American Indian students. I believe they have programs where students can participate in music and culture. But I think because of COVID, not much of that happened last year. I've heard stories of it happening. I'm also relatively new to the district, so I'm still learning about all of the programs that we offer. But there is some of that going on in the high school.
We excuse me. We only have about 1% Native Americans in the school district, so they're not, that 1% is not represented well, and I'm hoping that we can do something about that. I think this is a great time to actually transition to the conversation about appropriation. So I'd like to make my students more aware of Native American music practices. How can I avoid appropriation of Native American culture while still teaching our students about the culture and music?
This is a question I get. Well, I see people posting it and I don't always answer it. I'm like, oh my gosh. But Native American musicians, there's a ton of us. I currently have composed a couple of songs in my own style called the circle dance that is part of a curriculum that's going to be released, I know, in the UK. I don't know if it's coming here to the United States, but a really key thing to know is all Native American artists and our music is online. But there's no, you just have to know. So if you go to a powwow, you'll hear drum groups on there. Like Northern Cree is a really high standard drum group to listen to. And I think it would be good just to expose kids to that type of singing, which is our powwow singing. Round dance, it's called round dance songs. If you go to YouTube and you put in round dance songs, or modern day round dance or hand drum songs, well, round dance songs, you will hear some of these songs are sung in English, but there's a certain beat to it, right? And then some of the songs are sung in English. These are very popular songs, but you will find some artists. And just like any music, there's quality musicians, there's intermediate musicians, there's beginning musicians. And so we do have, it's really important to understand that, like analyzing cultural music of any kind, there's always the people who do it up top. There's people who are learning. Just like myself, I was such a perfectionist in playing my instruments, my clarinets and everything like that, that always performing at that one level, always performing at that top level. We have those, and those musicians within our culture, and they are online. Now, it takes time to get a list of those people, and it just takes time. And that's what educators need to know, is that just like playing a new instrument, if I only read about playing the clarinet, I read this book about playing the clarinet, can I effectively go and teach that? That's absurd. And oftentimes I have people send me their master's degree papers about Native education or Native American people. And I'm like, this is like coming from here. There was no experience. So the more hours you put in listening and watching, usually dancing and music go hand in hand, unlike classical music. And this is what my master's degree project was. Why do we stop moving after elementary school? So I'm a dancer, I'm a Zumba instructor, I'm a Native American powwow dancer, and then I learned world dances. So in my music classes, there will be a day where I will dance some sort of dance from around the world, but I learn those from people from their countries who have been studying them. So I bring that into my middle school classes, especially, I was a teacher at the first half of COVID. And so I would show a video in the beginning of the day, like I showed a soca video from one of the Caribbean islands. So my kids could see, oh, there's another way to live, or I showed some dembo, which is people speaking Spanish. I showed my kids on this side, some Black people who speak Spanish. There are a ton of people, so that they get out of these mindsets. And then I have a few videos that show me dancing as well. But I know enough about each and every one of those cultures that I preface it first, and then I show my kids. This was in the band room. You know, sometimes we'd start off our class, we're going to watch this. We have our own versions of what the United States flag means. We always honor our veterans. This is a huge category, you know, in band, the patriotic songs, the marches. Well, Native American students, and as a Native American band director, I oftentimes feel uncomfortable playing certain songs. And I won't score them. And when I choose music for like to go to a festival, there's a lot of festival choices that are stereotypical in sound. And so you just train your ear by hours of listening, being around it, and then you just know. So to avoid cultural appropriation, just like you would prepare for a solo or something, you got to know what the standard is. You know, you got to have that ear. And that's what I would encourage people. But we live online. Everything you find about us is on YouTube or Facebook. There's a Facebook page that's still up right now. It's called the Social Distance Powwow. If you go there, it's a Facebook group anybody can join. You will hear songs, music, honorings. And a lot of times when Native people, when we go, we will tell you who we are, what type of song we're singing, where it comes from, why we're doing it, and what it means. So that's a whole, you know, you ingest enough of that, you'll start to see a pattern here. And many Indigenous people function this way worldwide. Like, it's not just Native here in the United States, but when we meet other Indigenous nations, they'll tell us why they're singing this song, who wrote it, blah, blah, you know, there's this whole, and it's all up here. Nothing's written down. So that's another way to avoid, I think the biggest way to avoid cultural appropriation is to spend time, hours and hours and hours and hours of time listening to songs, but then going and interacting with the people.
You mentioned your YouTube channel. We'll have a link in the description below. It's you've got great conversation or not conversations, but presentations, I guess I would say, and they're both with your dance and tackling some of these concepts that we're talking about. One of the terms you use in your videos that it's a little bit of a new term to me is culture bearer. Can you define what a culture bearer is?
The only way to really understand what a culture bearer is to meet a lot of them. That way, of any culture. So that would be, how do you know that they're recognized by their community? Well, if you go to a powwow or an event, you hear their name being called on the by the MC, or they get up and they talk about it, or they have videos sometimes on YouTube. But then you even have to really listen to the videos. Not all people who consider themselves culture bearers are, but I would consider someone who is a culture bearer, number one, they have a connection back to, and they are recognized by a community. That means that I used to work in higher education, cultural diversity, and I used to be the Native American higher education person. I used to work with the scholarship coordinator who had to hand out different scholarships to Native students. So if a Native student came to me, because anybody can check a box, I'm this, give me scholarship money. That doesn't mean that you are. So if students were claiming I'm Native, and we have people claiming I'm Native, especially in academia and all kinds of areas, well, what I would then do is, a lot of times those people would come meet me and I said, do you have your tribal enrollment number? Do you have, you know, different things, or they would tell me a story. And this is very common. Sometimes some people get adopted out when they're kids. And then you have 576 different tribes who get to decide when people get to enroll. And some tribes cut off enrollment. If you're 18 and above, you cannot enroll anymore. So I called back to a couple of tribes and I said, hey, I have this student here, gave a couple of names. They're like, oh yeah, that is his family, but our cutoff is 18. There has to be, with a culture bearer, someone who's claiming, and music, film, these are huge things. There has to be a legit recognition by that tribe. And that person needs to be active in the community, because I could be a scholar and have no connection to my tribe. And I could put out books that people are just going to eat up. And then if somebody from my tribe comes and I'm not recognized and they start asking questions, either they've been given culturally appropriated information, or it just gets really messed up there. So a culture bearer, someone who is recognized by their community, does their songs, and they do it within their community. They don't do it in front of just non-Indigenous people. Because I know people who only give presentations to non-Indigenous people. They will never do it in front of Native people. And it's almost as if they're playing this stereotypical role of the Westerns, of the thing like that. So, and this takes time to develop, but also, like myself, I never saw myself as a culture bearer, but yeah, I dance and do all these different things, but I never saw myself in that role. And that was a term that music educators tend to recognize. And ethnomusicology is not, reading things by ethnomusicology is not a replacement for talking to the real thing, because it's an outsider's opinion of another culture. So that's real key too, right there with identifying culture bearers. But some of them, like myself, they might say, I'm not a culture bearer. And if you just know that, you just talk to them on a regular, just talk to them, okay, well, I heard you had this song. You could kind of really identify who they are.
Do you think there's a better term that we could use?
Well, this is where, so if I'm talking to somebody from a different tribe here in Nevada, we have 28, and I say, oh, do you know anybody who sings these songs? Do you know anyone who sings these specific type of songs? They're like, oh yeah, this person. I mean, and this is another area where you spend enough time around different cultures, you can come up with 10 different things to call 10 different people, and you can remember that. So some people might say, okay, well, there's the song keeper, there's the blah, blah, blah. They may have a different terminology. It's the same thing, but there's the circle dance singer. Oh, that's the flag song person. That's the, it's very, I don't want to say informal, but it's a way of communicating and knowing, like it's very personable. Which takes academia off the table. It just really, who sings songs in your tribe, and they may have a name for it. And then usually I go back into different tribes more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times. I form a relationship, and then I start knowing, and then that becomes a new part of my vocabulary. So I'm always gaining new ways to say the same thing.
I think what I like, I don't want to say what I like about that term, but in our interview script, we're using the term non-culture bearers kind of to describe Scott and I, because we have, it highlights this very different relationship we have to this music and culture we're talking about than somebody else might have. So do you have any advice for us non-culture bearers when it comes to creating these two-way relationships?
I say the first, so there's like, we can tell the difference, and this is just me or anybody, between people who are genuinely interested in our culture without romanticizing us, without, oh my God. So I'm a dancer, and if I was at a powwow, or I'm dancing and getting ready, and somebody comes up to me and they're just like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. And they start touching my hair and they start touching everything. And then they're all, what's your Indian name? Like, I was like, wait, what? You don't even know. Why are you approaching me like this? But then there's other people who will say, wow, you have really nice beadwork. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, you said beadwork, which is a term we use to each other all the time. This is somebody who spent time either with somebody directly, and they're not treating us like this romanticized fictional, which is the default that Hollywood went to after the Westerns. So we have never been in control of our image. So anyone who takes the time, we can tell, or I can tell, I guess maybe I'll just put myself here. I can tell to the extent whether or not you've spent time around any other Native Americans, if they're dancers or something like that, because of how you will speak to me. So like watching videos, we have regalia making videos online. There are song making videos. There's a ton of people online, and there's just full out powwows online. You could like look up one for 6 hours. There's powwow vlogs. There's different Native American video logs online. And you just listen to it and just pick up the terminology, you know, like anything. I think that is the most safest approach. And the one I get the most that we know is untrue, that I would highly recommend stay away from unless you can prove an actual connection. Way too many people tell me they're Cherokee. And when anybody claims Native American Indian ancestry here in the United States, I feel like, and I listen to a lot of people who talk about this, they want to assume that they feel more American just by saying that, or my great grandmother was a Cherokee princess, something that does not exist. Unless you can tie names back to a community that will, claim you and say, yeah, I know so-and-so. It's best to not start off a conversation with any of us. My great grandmother was insert here. And that, unfortunately, when I hear that, my heart sinks a little bit. And I know what's coming next. Like, I kind of know either you want validation from me, you want me to think you're something like that. And I think a lot of natives that I talk to when we deal with that, sometimes I just say, okay, so stay away from any kind of things that you can't prove, because anybody knows there's so many of us Native Americans these days, or Native tribal members. If you're claiming you're from somewhere, even if maybe you're not from that tribe, but that tribe knows you, people will claim you. People will claim you. So stay away from my great grandmother was this, or my grandkids are this, so I know that. No.
Until recently, I didn't really know that I could attend powwows. I assumed that it was, stay away for me. And so and then just in this conversation, I've got really excited. I've pulled up powwows in Minnesota, and I'm hoping to be able to attend one here this summer. Maybe take.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the big one you were talking about, I believe, is in Mankato. I'd love to go down to Mankato to see that. That would be fun. Not too far away from us.
Yeah. So I'm a little curious now. This is shifting gears a little bit, about like some of your music experiences growing up, and your dance experiences, because I've watched some of your dance videos on YouTube, and I'm curious, like, how long have you been dancing? Has it been since you were a child, or is it adulthood, or?
So it's been since I've been a child. So we have a Head Start program. A lot of reservations have the Head Start program. It's like preschool, funded, I think on the reservations, probably funded from the government. We don't really get state funding. So I went there as like a 3 or 4 year old, and my grandma made me like a little ribbon dress. We call them for Paiute here, ribbon dress, and like I put it on, we go bouncing around. And so that's how I started out I remember just being at a powwow when I was 3 or 4 in our community, and I was just in that dress bouncing around. And then they had the Natchez dance group, which was primarily Northern Paiute dances at that time at the school on my reservation. So I grew up on the Pyramid Lake Paiute Indian Reservation. We have a school on the Pyramid Lake Paiute Indian Reservation called Natchez, which is the name of the brother of Sarah Winnemucca. Sarah Winnemucca was the first ever Native American woman to publish her own biography. She's a Northern Paiute woman. She helped to get the school built, so it's named after her brother. So I started dancing, just hopping around when I was 3. Then my great-grandmother, the one whose name appears on the tribal rolls, she actually made buckskin dresses. And the buckskin dress that we know today, she went to, or it's an adopted style, I believe, when I talked to one of our elders who's restarting our language. It's an adopted style, the dress style from Fort Hall, Idaho. They started dressing in certain style of dress. So my great grandmother learned how to do this. She'd smoke the hide, she'd skin the hide. She lived here on the reservation, and she was able to do that. So she made dresses, and then she made a little girl's dress, which my mom's Washoe, she's not Paiute, but my mom decided to my sister wore that, and she danced in the Natchez dance group. So then there came the day where I have to wear it, and I have to dance in the Natchez dance group. But it's a beautiful buckskin dress. And at the time, I was like 8 years old. I was like, this dress is so boring. All I do is like walk along the Northern Paiute dress. And I saw other girls with a shawl and like fancy stuff, and other girls with like jingles. I was like, I want to do that. I was like, I'm so boring. And then people would be, your dress is so beautiful. Look at this. At that time when I'm 8, and if there's other educators listening to this, when we're 8 years old, we have no concept of family heirlooms being passed down, or, you know, we want to fit in, we want to do fun. So to me, I was like, I want to be fancy, but no. So I learned my Northern Paiute dances, which we have a snake dance, we did a bear dance, we did our honor dance, we did the version of owl dance that I was taught, which is different than the powwow owl dance that I found out later. And then I outgrew the dress by 5th grade. But those songs, my music in my head, I remember those songs as my first introduction, like to pitches and things like that. So I have a preference towards minor keys, like, you know, like in songs, I don't like the major keys very much. Songs sound too happy. So we have like some, I guess, accidentals in our stuff. So I am very, you know, my preference is that. But if you listen to our songs, that's what I remember of my childhood. Then came the classical musical training right at 10. I didn't dance at all. And in college, I started dancing again. I'm like, well, this time I'm going to make my own this. I'm going to make my own. And I made my own beadwork. I started doing my own thing. And I started dancing fancy shawl, what you see a lot in my videos, at 19. But the buckskin dress, my great grandmother had another buckskin dress that my grandma, when she was alive, she gave it to me because she saw me starting to take an interest in dancing again. And my great grandmother died when I was 6. So she gave me that dress when I was like 21 or something. And they're at our powwows locally in Nevada, maybe Idaho, maybe Oregon. Sometimes we do our Paiute dancing and I wear my great grandmother's dress. For those. Now I know exactly how important it is. Now I am proud to say that my first dancing was my Northern Paiute, which is what I am. And then I do the powwow dances, which is more fancy. And that is a lifestyle. It is a way you carry yourself. We use the most innovative clothing. If you can see, we travel far. And I've made dresses and outfits while full-time attending a master's program, having a job in there, being a band director full-time, going to a festival. I remember finishing a jingle dress a little after that. And I'm like, how did I do this? You know, so it's a real passion. And it's representative of who we are. So they're not costumes. It's not something we dress up in to pretend like we're being. It's not Halloween. It's literally a representation of who we are today. Like, it's almost like fashion week or fashion stuff that comes out, but sometimes you can tell by how people are dressed what tribe they are from. In my category, it's really hard. The women's fancy show, it's really harder to tell. But if we ever have a traditional night, then I'll put on the buckskin dress kind of thing. So I started when I was young and I continue today but I'm getting older. So the fitness lifestyle for what I do, yeah, I have to make time for my fitness, definitely.
So in my ignorance, I think that I thought that music, the only role music played in Native American culture was ceremonial. Could you enlighten me a little bit more?
So this is, yeah, no, it's not just ceremonial. And so I compose songs, and I never thought I would love teaching kindergarten or pre-K. And so we have some songs that go along with stories that you find in our tribes, and many stories in our tribes have to do with teaching a life lesson. There's something behind it. Yeah, animals talk, the trees can talk, anything could be in that story, but it usually has to do with the land and the area. So I like the fun songs. We have songs about rabbits here in Nevada, and those are meant for kids to sing and to be cute, or it accompanies a story to teach a lesson. And so the other thing that we have here is that and here's I guess the culture bearer, I'll bring that term back. An actual culture bearer for a tribe will never give away things to anybody that are only meant for private ceremonies or something that's only meant for the tribe. And the majority of, I've met other people who sing and dance and stuff, and that's just something we know not to do. So if you ever get invited to a ceremony can be anything from a ceremony. The people will tell you what's going on. And if you get invited, they'll tell you what you can and cannot share. And this is where ethnomusicologists and anthropologists, that cultural protocol, I think sometimes gets broken here. You're putting it in a book and you're taking it and then you're writing it in Western notation, which I can write in Western notation, but I choose not to. That stuff, usually I wouldn't give away. But we have other songs, like I said, like for company stories, we have songs just to play. We have songs here in Nevada. Pine nut season is coming up. We have songs about our pine nuts, about the food sources in the land. There's songs about friendships. And like I'm creating new songs for myself, for our kids today, specifically for our younger ones. And when I do that, it's still got to be in the style. It has to follow the drum beat. And then most of the songs you find on YouTube, they're there, and I would just listen to them, not listen to recreate them, but listen to them enough times. And if it's on there, then it's pretty good. But there are some rules. I don't think there's a lot of people breaking the rules with some songs that shouldn't go on. But if you look in the comments underneath, if you see enough people saying this shouldn't be being on here, chances are that's not a good song. But like I said, we have songs about friendship, we have songs about mothers and daughters. Our veterans, we have a ton of veteran songs. We have a ton of songs about veterans. And if every powwow you go to, if you go to one, every powwow at the beginning, you will see flags being carried in. You will see a Native staff. You will hear flag songs. You will hear honor songs. You will hear veteran songs possibly. And then you just list, the MC will tell you. Flag songs are one of my favorites because the Star Spangled Banner is becoming pretty controversial because we know the other verses, it wasn't written for us. It's kind of another take off of a French song or something like that. So we have our own flag songs. And so those are real nice ones to listen to. Even if you don't recreate them, just see another group of people, how we are, how they adapted, honoring our veterans, honoring the United States flag. And it is an honoring of the United States flag. So there's those songs that are pretty big. We have traveling songs, like at the end of a conference, a Native conference or a powwow sometimes, or educational conferences. Sometimes at the closing session, they'll invite someone to sing a traveling song, meaning that that's a song for everybody for safe traveling home. and they may tell you what it is. Almost any kind of song you could think about, and whatever your state is, like Minnesota, you guys are by the Ojibways or the Anishinaabes. Different bands too. There's more than one different Anishinaabe tribe. Plus you got the Canadian border where they go clear up there. They may have specific songs just in that area about the snow, about whatever foods you still eat or they don't eat, like the wild rice or something like that. It just spans the gamut, but you can guarantee that any of the songs that are from the tribe in the area are about the land. So I think that might bring a whole new look on what we consider really patriotic songs, or what we consider songs that represent the United States. Because there's songs that represent your area. There's songs that represent my area, but it originates with the people who are in the area.
So I'm super fascinated by your experience as both a band musician, band director, and a Native American. How do you, like, what does a decolonized band room look like for you? In particular, some of the advice I've been given is give up on the idea of performance altogether. How do you feel about that? Like, describe a decolonized band room.
Well, this is where performances are important. This is what I'm going to say, but not so like if I'm teaching a Native dance in my class, or if I decide to write out a melody of one of our Pine Nut songs and I want my band to play it, we are going to play it. We are going to perform it for the community, because that brings the community closer together. This is, again, this is where, to me, the decolonizing model, it's not performance in the aspect of, we need to get a 1. We're getting a 1+. It has to be, we're just driving the kids home. Did you practice? It's not that. It's, okay, we're getting this piece ready because our community that we are performing for, these are the kids, and I'm going to show what these kids know. And if it's something that reflects their culture, or if it's not even if it's just a piece that isn't culturally appropriated, it's just a nice piece of music, playing things at a high quality level and showing whatever community the kids come from matters. And I'm a band director here on my reservation. The last one I was only a band director here 2 years. So my 6th grade beginning band, I didn't spend a whole lot of time teaching them Native stuff, but I was like, okay, by our Christmas music, we start the year in August. By December, I want them playing sheet music. So I went to the grade level. There's grade level 1, there's grade level half, we're going to put this together. And I was able to do it in addition to, okay, I want 3-line songs from the book. And we have to be cognizant about what our communities want. In my Native community, there's no relationship, like in a bad way, to Christmas. They flat out still call it a Christmas concert. There's no religious connection there. So I'm like, okay, we're going to play Christmas songs. Minus now Jingle Bells has a crazy past, but that's what I did for my community. And what I grew up with, the band director I grew up with out here, he wasn't Native, but he knew we could all sing at a high level. We always performed at a high level, everything, and our community loved it. So I tried to bring that back. And I worked as a band director at the high school here a while back. But what I found in the cabinet was like on the warpath, the da 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 da. I'm like, who put this in here? Got rid of it, ripped it up. There's other grade level music that doesn't follow stereotypical things, but absolutely performances need to happen because that's what creates a sense of community. All cultural music, if I'm practicing a hand drum song, I'm going to be singing that out in the community, either at a hand drum thing or a gathering. like I just came back from Mexico, and my fiance is from Mexico, and they have bandas, you know, musicians, and those musicians, let me tell you, they play for 12 hours straight with like 30 minutes on, 40 minutes on, 20 minutes off. That's 12 hours. They don't, you know, if they were to sit there in their little communities, oh, we're just playing in the room and not going out, you know, like, why aren't you guys coming out and sharing with us? Like, what do you guys? So that this concept of performing for festivals, performing for perfection in a westernized thing that we're trained to perform to, I think is the wrong way to look at it. So I absolutely, whatever Native community or any community, not just Native, because I've, you know, performed with kids from many different backgrounds. I'd like to know who they are, because I know what the elders want to see in the group before they're gone. You know, I put the kids out there and to perform music at a good level for their parents. And so I think if we get away from the just those models, like, what did you guys get at festival? It's not about that. We need to get away from that. And even when I performed as a drum major when I was in high school, I taught my band how to march. But I could read scores. I've been reading scores forever. The first time I ever conducted was when I was 13 here on my reservation. And I think back on that. Why did my band director do that? Why did he leave me in charge of the class? And it wasn't just me. There was 2 or 3 other Native kids. So I had one of my students, my 6th graders, conduct a song. I was like, okay, I'm going to teach them the pattern. They know what beat is. We know what community is. And so I had him, with some help, because they might get nervous. I had a 6th grader conducting a song, grade level 1 song, all the way through. Me, I think I was playing the bass drum in the back. I'm like, I'm right here. You know, it's cool. But being a band over, like, this concept of performing in communities, we work on our dancing and stuff so we can be in front of our communities performing. And cultural people, that's just how we are. So I think performing is absolutely, we need different training on it too, I think, as music educators. Those of us who know what it's like to perform at a high quality level, those of us who need more help developing our kids to be able, because I don't believe that if you never performed at a high level, how do you know what it takes to get there? You know, do you yourself, do us as educators like performing? I do, because I love seeing people have a great time. But if I wasn't that way, I'd probably be like, yeah, cool, we don't have to perform. But the other part is what type of music are we playing? A lot of the kids in my school district, where I just recently resigned again, they're Mexican. They have a lot of live music at their parties. So when I place an instrument into their hands, they've already seen this instrument being played for hours on end sometimes. And that's just not the experience that we're able to give them as band directors, because we're not trained that way. So I think it's always good to be open to learning new ways so that we could teach kids how to play, maybe without instruments, because they see on YouTube and stuff, they see people playing instruments like Bruno Mars, all those bands. They don't see them reading music, you know, and they want the flash, they want certain things. And decolonizing to me also, if I don't do it, why am I going to expect my kids to, regardless if my undergrad or graduate degree prepared me for it? If I'm asking them to do something that I can't do, where do I need to go to get the skills to get them to do that? And I was teaching mariachi right before I left. And I'm not the best violin player, but I sat down and made myself sit down 2 to 3 hours or an hour or 2 after school. I'm like, I know how this song goes, and I could get the melody out to something. The trumpet, I could play the trumpet. The guitarrón, oh my God, I just had to learn. So decolonizing means also, we're never done learning about cultures. The music prep programs we've all been in, I started playing trumpet when I was 12. I started playing flute when I was 12. If I relied on my class brass and my class woodwind, I would not be able to pick up the instrument and just show the kid. Yeah, so I think decolonizing just means being open to new ways of doing things and to not always need a guide, but you got to do your, you got to do your homework. It's like on us. And festivals need to be changing their lists. And then we also need to train our ears to what sounds are culturally appropriating. Some of the Asian rhapsodies or something, are those legit songs that are supposed to be being played? Or if you're so inclined, or kind of sounds like you guys might be able to, we can write our own songs as well. And does that, and I'm saying this to myself specifically too, we can write our own music and have it played, or we could just show the kids how to play it and maybe play something that's not written down.
So that sort of bridges into my next question, that as I've gone through this, I've found there's kind of a huge lack of resources in terms of Native American music specifically related to band. And I think as band directors, like, we have the ability to kind of drive resource development a little bit. What can we do to help create more resources for band directors in a band room?
I think at this current time is listening to as much of our music as you can, because when we even have a local composer here, I mean, I'm kind of, I play in the Reno Wind Symphony. We have a local composer here who wrote some Native song, but he could have just came and asked me just a little bit, and I would have sat down with him and said, hey, here's some melodies that are legitly from this area. Stay away from the drum beats, the dun. But if you listen to Native music hours and hours on end, you'll just know, okay, well, we can't put that in a song. Well, the recorder is not a replacement for a Native flute. And a Native flute isn't like a new age thing. Like, find out from a Native American flute player, because they usually talk about their teachings. There's a ton of videos online by non-Native, non-culture bearing, never been taught by a Native, right, on Native flute. Like, why would you score that if you've never listened at length to any Native people, or realize that I think Carlos Nakai, he's a flautist. He's tried to write some stuff down, but traditionally I've never seen any flute players that I know personally that I perform with. They don't do that. So the resources that I would say, I'm forgetting his name. He's a Native American composer. I think there's a guy named Russell Wallace. He's going to be starting a choir, and he's going to hopefully, there's some of the scores will be written, but he's going to rely on the oral memory of Indigenous singing, which is cool. Brent Michael Davids. Brent Michael Davids is the closest composer that we have right now, and I think he only has one piece that's like grade 3. Yeah, it starts
there are like, so I've gone through the band library, and I think I've found a total of 9 pieces that kind of respectfully feature Native American material. 3 are by Brent Michael Davids. 3 are by this team in Canada, Robert Buckley and Brett Baker, and then there are 3 companion pieces to those. But other than that, like, I haven't really found anything that comes with this like permission, I guess.
And here's, I think, where we're at is in terms of when we look at Indigenous Native nations, there's a whole branch of the United States government dedicated to us. No other cultural group in the United States gets this. So, and for me personally, I have talked to some music companies to share maybe songs with, but if someone's wanting the full copyrights to me, and then the people can no longer sing those songs within the tribe, this is something Native people, we need to get more educated on, but we also can utilize our tribal governments. Now, if a tribal government has something saying that all songs and everything are their property and of them, this would mean that if you're working with a local artist, which would be the best thing, that local artist oftentimes has rights to do maybe whatever they want without selling their songs or something like that. So we have laws that are in place actually over like our Paiute songs that we can say, why are you using that? So if you do compose something, it would be best to work with somebody in the area with the song, so that who gets to decide who has the rights? Is this going to be published nationally, internationally, or whatever? So I think that would be good to work with a local artist, and maybe just have your band learn how to accompany, or like they sing a song and then you get your, and this is my idea too that I have, and I never got to fully do it, like with the Reno Philharmonic Orchestra. I just didn't have time. I was like, okay, I'm going to sing this song. Here's the chords. Here's what I would like you to play underneath what I am doing. So it could be a collaborative project if you have a local flautist or something like that, or even one of the kids that you could probably put an accompaniment to, and then you guys create something that's necessarily just for your school. But I know people always want to say, well, can I have that version? Can I have that? Can you email that over to me? Like some band directors, like, what is that score? Can I go buy it? What did you play? Because I want to be more decolonized too. But with this, it has to be in your area. And I know plenty of friends in like the Canada and different things. They do projects with people locally, even myself. So that's what I would think it would be. Take your musical knowledge, what you know of composition, of what you know of chords, and then, or if the Native person knows a little bit, I try to act like I don't know a lot about theory, just because theory is theory. but ultimately I do have a master's degree. I had to pass some tests, to get into there. So that's my own block too, to myself, like really put that to work and just let the Native artists function in the oral capacity that we function in, along with maybe a accompaniment. I think that would be really good.
Cool. I guess I'll finish up with my last question here. It's sort of related, but in terms of just kind of learning generally, do you have any recommendations for resources? And I know we've already talked a lot about, listening and watching podcasts, but say some of us are big readers. Like, are there things we should read, things we shouldn't?
Yeah. So one thing I used to tell when I first started on decolonizing, and I haven't been on there in a while, is to look up Native American federally recognized tribes in your state. Because just doing that alone, you will find however many there are, you'll see different bands of Ojibwe or Chippewa or Anishinaabe. They all have different names. That's really important. And when you do that, you just look up all the different bands. Like in Nevada, we have like 28. And I used to work for the Intertribal Council of Nevada, so I got real familiar with some of them. And my mom's a member of another one. But you can also then kind of look up their histories. So I don't know, there's a book called The Lies My Teacher Told Me. I don't know if you ever read about that. It's called The Lies My Teacher Told Me. I forget who the author is right now. But it gives you an insight into different parts of the United States and what really happened. And you might find out that in your state is not fully your state. So there's fights all the time between state level governments and the Native American tribes that are there, because Native American tribes are federal. And the states sometimes still want to keep taking more land that isn't theirs. So we're in constant battles. So if you look up the tribes within your state and you find out who they are, what they are, lots of tribes have websites, and then you could go to the websites and you could find, just kind of look at how they're structured. And Native thought that's been going on for a long time. This is just something now I'm going to be speaking on a lot more, is the role that women played and the role of like just how we think. For instance, men and women can have long hair. That's neither feminine nor masculine. And that point I forgot was brought up to me. It's like, okay, so if I have a boy student with long hair, I have a girl student with long hair, if they're Native, there's no concept of me to say, hey, there's no concept there of right or wrong. Women can be warriors, men can be warriors, both can speak up. So there's a different way of thinking. And Luther Standing Bear is a person you could probably read like an article or two. He's someone you can look up online. Luther Standing Bear. He has an English name. He was one of the ones who went to the Carlisle, Pennsylvania boarding school. They took a chance on him. Some of the white people at the boarding school sent him to college. He became out a doctor. So you can look up story about him. Sitkala Saw, I believe that's Z-I-T, Sitkala, K-A-L-A, Saw, S-A. She was another openly, she just spoke, right? Just kind of how I'm speaking to you today, just you could hear the thought process. And then Sarah Winnemucca from my tribe was the first Native American biography by a Native American woman in the country. And you can order that book, I think, on Amazon. And it's told from their point of view. And so when you get in and the more people you think about or talk to, even natives in this day, and I myself being a Native woman, I'm a conductor, in college, I will speak up at different things. I'm like, I will read that score, give me a grade level 5 piece. I'll conduct it for you. I don't care if it's in 1-8-3, 8-5-4. But there's a different way that Native women, we carry ourselves. So me being in this field, knowing that we don't have a lot of doctorate Native, or we don't have many women band directors who run university programs. Me functioning in this environment, not feeling like I don't have a right to be here, not feeling like I have to sidestep anyone's feelings at the PhD level, at anything, just feeling free to open my opinion. It goes back to the way that Natives think, so that we don't have some people can have an American way of thinking. Women should be quieter, more soft-spoken, or I'm the elementary music teacher, I'm just nice and kind all the time. Or I feel like if I'm teaching music kids, whoever you are and whoever your identity is, where you're from, I want to validate and enforce that. It's going to be different from mine, but I will tell you mine, and I will tell you who I am, and I'll tell you where I come from, and I'll tell you a little bit about my culture. But I like to be a model for my students. So say if they're Mexican American, it's like, what portion of your culture are you going to retain? Because when you get to college and people ask you where you're from, if you go to college or into the military and you can't tell them, I know students, so that's a huge crusher for them. So yeah, those things are good to read. I used to work for the University of Vancouver, like I said, and we used to do reports on how many Native students we had, the percentage. If I ran events, what percentage of Native students actually attended. So there's a numbers game out there, but that doesn't mean we're going to retain them. The knowledge that I had, the type of programs and how I spoke to those Native students, what kind of programs I put on that attracted them, did I validate them? Am I giving them things they need to know to get where they're going? And to talk with other adults of other cultures who are probably college educated or who do presentations around a lot, talk with adults of other cultures, as many adults, because I find if you can, like, you know, the default is to want to talk to other music educators who are not from any of the cultures, or the default, go read this book who the outsider wrote about, you know, a 500-page book about Native Americans, or I think those beginning band volumes, have you seen them? Beginning band volume 1, beginning band volume 2, about what a band director needs to know, and they put pieces in. I had to do it for my master's in conducting class. And how, I don't know, just how the performances are in the communities. So Brett Michael Davids, is that his name? He has some good articles, a really good article to read. Now, I've had some educators send it to me and say, oh, it's problematic. I couldn't find the problem in it. And that definitely, as middle school, high school band directors, and maybe getting into the professional, needs to be probably unpacked and opened. Carlos Abril, he was a researcher that I read a lot in my undergrad, and I quoted him a lot. Carlos Abril, A-B-I-R-L. I don't know if you guys have access to universities, that if you could get those articles. Those are great articles to read with an open mind and not being sitting there defensive, like, that's not my experience, that's not true. And then Gloria, oh, what is her name? I can't, I forget what her name. I have to try to remember these things. I'm trying to go back to some of my academia work. And if you just put in Vine Deloria Jr. into YouTube to listen to some things that he has to say, you'll find a whole different thought process. Because since the start of the United States, I view music very differently than the other music educators. Even though I went to a college, I did not pick up the same, I did not come out of that college with the same values of individualism. It's just me. No, it's my whole community. And I've had professors who have not liked me and who have liked me, but I just had to get, you know, through what's going on. So through reading some of those books and definitely listening to Vine Deloria, you might be able to understand the music better, because we believe everything's all connected. Music is not separate from who we are. Dancing is not separate. Well, sometimes we have special songs that have no dancing, but essentially music and community and dancing are all together. Unlike, you know, a Philharmonic, you have to go to their concert hall, which has no windows, which maybe locks you out. You have to dress a certain way. How dare you clap? Although this, I kind of feel like this might be loosening up. How dare you clap in between these songs, you know, just building a bigger community around that.
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for your time. Kevin, thank you for co-hosting. This has been a very enlightening conversation. I look forward to future interactions with the both of you. Thank you guys so much.